The gate wasn't just beige, it was aggressively beige. It was the color of a dentist's waiting room, where you know you're about to get a root canal and they've run out of Novocaine. It was also locked. I stood there, blinking in the mid-July heat, holding a 50-pound bag of chicken feed in my left hand and a certified letter in my right. My truck, a 2015 Silverado that I affectionately called the Beast, and Mrs. Higgins affectionately called that eyesore, was idling behind me. "Can I help you, Jack?" I didn't need to turn around to know she was there. I could smell the lavender laundry detergent and the distinct metallic scent of absolute authority. Mrs. Higgins, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association, the beige banshee. I turned slowly. She was standing on the other side of the wrought iron bars, clutching a clipboard like it was the 10 Commandments. "The code isn't working, Brenda," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "and neither is the remote." She offered a tight, sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile a shark might give a seal before dragging it into the depths. "Oh, the code works fine, Jack. For residents." "My dad is a resident," I pointed out. "I'm delivering food for his chickens. Chickens that, may I add, were here about 30 years before your beige gate was." "The chickens are grandfathered in," she conceded, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "Your truck, however, is not." I looked back at the Beast. It had a little mud on the tires, maybe a dent in the bumper. It was a truck. It did truck things. "Brenda, what are you talking about?" "Section 4, paragraph C, clause 2, she recited, without looking down. "All vehicles traversing the primary access road must maintain a curb weight of under 4,000 pounds to preserve the structural integrity of the asphalt aesthetic." Also, Section 9 regarding visual harmony. Your truck is distinctively inharmonious. Inharmonious? I dropped the chicken feed. A puff of dust settled on my boots. "It's a pickup truck. It's American steel. It's harmonious with the concept of doing actual work. It's loud, Jack, and it leaks oil. We had a vote last night. Emergency session." I didn't get an email. "It went to the homeowners," she said sweetly. "Your father didn't attend. He was busy. He was probably asleep. He's 72. Well, the vote passed. The access road is now restricted to passenger sedans and approved SUVs. No commercial vehicles, no heavy machinery, and certainly no beasts." I stared at her. I stared at the gate. The barn, my dad's barn, was exactly 200 yards away. I could see the roof. I could walk there in 3 minutes. But I couldn't carry a rebuilt transmission for a 1978 John Deere tractor in my arms. "So I'm banned," I said flatly. "The road is banned," she corrected. "You are welcome to walk. It's great cardio." I have tools, Brenda. I have feed. I have a dad who thinks Wi-Fi is a government plot to steal his dreams. I need to drive there. "Then perhaps you should buy a Prius," she suggested. And then, with a terrifying finality, she turned and walked away toward her pristine alabaster McMansion. I stood there for a long moment. I looked at the chicken feed. I looked at the gate. "I hate beige," I whispered. The walk to the barn took 5 minutes because I was dragging the feed sack and seething. By the time I kicked open the side door of the barn, I was sweating and ready to fight a bear. "You look like you swallowed a lemon whole," a voice grunted from under the tractor. All I could see of my father was a pair of oil-stained work boots and blue coveralls. "She blocked me, Dad," I said, dropping the feed with a thud. "Higgins, she put up an electronic gate and banned my truck." Frank slid out from under the massive green machine on a creeper. He was wiping grease off his hands with a rag that was greasier than his hands. He looked at me, squinting through bushy eyebrows. "The beige banshee strikes again?" "She cited asphalt aesthetic integrity," I said, grabbing a beer from the mini-fridge he kept next to the drill press. "She told me to buy a Prius." Frank let out a bark of laughter that turned into a cough. A Prius? You? You'd look like a bear riding a tricycle. It's not funny, Dad. How am I supposed to get the new transmission in here? I can't carry an engine block down the shoulder of the county road. Frank sat up, cracking his back. Well, I ain't selling. I told her that last week when she offered to buy the eyesore barn to build a yoga pavilion. I told her the only yoga happening here is me bending over backwards to ignore her. That doesn't solve my problem. I need access. I paced around the barn. It was a magnificent structure, older than the country itself in spirit, if not in timber. It smelled of diesel, hay, and old wood. It was an island of reality in a sea of homeowner association fantasy. Read the bylaws, Frank said, taking the beer from my hand and taking a long swig. Know your enemy. I don't have the... In the drawer. Under the manuals. I pulled open the rusty filing cabinet. There, sitting beneath a manual for a 1982 thresher, was the thick, bound copy of the Whispering Pines Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions. I sat on a hay bale and started reading. It was painful. It was dry. It was written by people who thought fun was something you scheduled between 4:00 p.m. and 4:15 p.m. on alternate Tuesdays. Section 4, Roadways. Section 5, Lawns. Section 6, Airspace, no drones. Section 7, Fences. I flipped pages aggressively. Surface rights, surface maintenance, curbside appeal. I stopped. I went back a page. I read it again. Dad? Yeah? Where does the HOA property line end relative to the county road? Ends at the ditch. The ditch is county easement. Everything past the ditch, up to the gate, is theirs. Why? I looked at the diagram in the book. The HOA had explicitly claimed dominion over the surface paved area, the curbs, the sidewalks, and the airspace up to 50 feet. I took a sip of my dad's beer. They defined the surface. They defined the air. So? They didn't define the dirt, I said. Specifically, the dirt under the dirt. I looked at the drainage ditch outside the barn door, which connected directly to the county road easement. Then I looked at the concrete floor of the barn. You got a shovel? Frank looked at me, a slow grin spreading across his grease-smeared face. Son, I got a backhoe attachment for the tractor, but the hydraulics are shot. That's why I needed you to bring the tools. We don't need a backhoe yet, I said, standing up. We need a contractor who doesn't ask questions. I found Sully on Craigslist. His ad didn't have a picture, just a sentence. I dig holes, I move dirt, cash only, no cops. It was exactly the kind of professional pedigree I was looking for. We met at a Waffle House on the edge of town at 6 a.m. Sully was a fireplug of a man, about 5'5" in both directions. He had a beard that looked like it had trapped small birds and eyes that were constantly scanning the exits. He didn't order waffles. He ordered 4 coffees and a bowl of grits. So? Sully said, his voice sounding like a cement mixer full of gravel. Who'd you kill? I choked on my orange juice. What? The hole. You want a tunnel. Usually that means you got a body, or you're trying to rob a bank. I don't do banks. Federal time ain't for me. Bodies? I charge double for biological waste disposal. No bodies, I said quickly, and no banks. I'm trying to get to a barn. Sully paused, his spoon hovering over his grits. A barn? My dad's barn. The HOA banned me from the road. I laid out the map on the sticky table. I showed him the county road, the drainage ditch, the 200 yards of pristine St. Augustine grass owned by the HOA, and the barn. I need a tunnel, I explained. From the ditch to the barn floor, big enough to walk through. Eventually, big enough to roll a transmission on a dolly. Sully stared at the map. He traced the line with a sausage-like finger. Under the HOA? Yes. Under the lady who measures grass height with a ruler? Mrs. Higgins, yes. Sully started to shake. I thought he was having a seizure, but then a high-pitched wheezing sound escaped his lips. He was laughing. It was a terrifying sound. I hate HOAs, Sully wheezed. My cousin got fined $3,000 for painting his mailbox classic red instead of heritage ruby. I'll do it. How much? $5,000, cash, plus materials. And you buy me lunch. Deal. The next morning, we set up the perimeter. This was the genius part. Since the entrance was in the drainage ditch on the county easement, the HOA couldn't touch us. But we needed to look official. I bought 3 rolls of orange safety fencing, 4 men working signs, and gave Sully a high-visibility vest that was, 2 sizes too small. I put on a hard hat I'd found in my garage. We looked incredibly legitimate. All right, Sully said, spitting into his hands. We start horizontal. We gotta go under the roadbed first, then angle up toward the barn foundation. We started digging. The first hour was exhilarating. We were rebels. We were subterranean freedom fighters. The dirt was soft, loamy clay. We were making progress. Then at 10:30 a.m., a white Lexus SUV slowed to a crawl on the road above us. The window rolled down. It was the Banshee. I leaned on my shovel, wiped sweat from my brow, and gave a cheerful wave. Morning, Brenda. She lowered her sunglasses. She looked at the signs. She looked at the ditch. She looked at the pile of dirt we were carefully tarping. What are you doing, Jack? Her voice was tight. Civil engineering, I called back. Erosion control, very technical stuff. County mandate. You know how it is with sediment displacement. I was stringing random words together. It was a gamble. I didn't receive a notification about county work, she said, suspicious. Oh, it's probably in the mail. Or maybe it got lost in the aesthetic review. I smiled. She narrowed her eyes. Ensure that no debris enters the roadway. And if I see one speck of mud on the asphalt, I'm calling the sheriff. Wouldn't dream of it, Brenda. Drive safe. She rolled up the window and drove off. Sully watched her go. That her? That's her. Man, Sully grunted, driving his spade into the earth. I'm gonna enjoy digging under her gazebo. Less talking, more digging, I said. We need to get 5 feet in before she comes back. We got 4 feet in. Then we hit the rock. It wasn't just a rock. It was a geological event. It was a granite boulder the size of a Kia Sorento, sitting directly in our path, mocking us. Sully hit it with his shovel. Clang! He hit it again. Clang! He looked at me. We're gonna need a bigger hammer. We can't use power tools yet, I hissed. Too loud! She'll hear us. Jack, Sully said, wiping mud from his beard. You want me to move a mountain with a spoon? We need a breaker bar, or we need dynamite. And since you said no cops, I'm assuming dynamite is out. Dynamite is definitely out. Then we go around it. That'll add 20 feet to the dig. You want a tunnel or you want a rock collection? We went around it. By sunset, we were exhausted, covered in mud, and had successfully created a hole deep enough to hide a refrigerator. We sat in the ditch, drinking warm Gatorade, looking at our handiwork. It was ugly. It was dark. It smelled like wet earth and bad decisions. It was beautiful. Hey, Sully said, pointing with his bottle. You hear that? I listened. Sirens. Coming fast. I scrambled up the bank of the ditch just in time to see a sheriff's cruiser pull onto the shoulder, lights flashing blue and red against the twilight. Officer Miller stepped out. I knew Miller. We'd gone to high school together. He looked tired. Jack, Miller sighed, adjusting his belt. Please tell me you aren't burying a body. Erosion control, Miller, I said, trying to look innocent while covered head to toe in muck. Uh-huh, Miller said. He looked at the hole. He looked at Sully, who was trying to look invisible in a neon vest. Then he looked at his notepad. I got a call about an unauthorized excavation threatening the structural integrity of the community entrance and a suspicious vagrant in high-vis gear. Sully isn't a vagrant, I said. He's a specialist. Specialist in what? Subterranean logistics. Miller rubbed his eyes. Jack, is this about the gate? Frank told me about the gate. It's about freedom, Miller. And drainage. Mostly drainage. Miller walked to the edge of the ditch. He peered into the gloom of our tunnel entrance. He looked at the HOA gate, then back at us. He hated Ms. Higgins almost as much as I did ever since she cited his patrol car for excessive idling while he was writing a ticket. Technically, Miller said slowly, the ditch is county, as long as you don't undermine the road surface. We're going deep, Sully piped up. Real deep. Miller suppressed a smile. Right, well, I don't see any violation here, just 2 men. Mitigating erosion. He turned back to his car. But Jack? Yeah? If she calls me again about noise, I have to come back. Keep it down. You got it, Miller. As he drove away, I turned to Sully. He was grinning. We got the law on our side, Sully said. Now, let's go rent that excavator. Renting an excavator is alarmingly easy. You need a credit card, a driver's license, and the ability to look a man in the eye and say, I know what I'm doing, even when you clearly do not. The machine was a Kubota K0083. It was compact, orange, and adorable in the way a baby hippo is adorable. Small, but capable of crushing you against a wall if you aren't careful. It's a micro-excavator, the rental guy, a man named Earl who chewed unlit cigars, told us. Fits through a standard doorway. Digs 7 feet deep. Don't tip it over. Has anyone ever tipped it over? I asked. Tuesday, Earl grunted. Guy tried to dig a koi pond on a 40-degree slope. Now he has a koi slide. We towed it back to the site behind the beast. Sully looked at the excavator with pure lust. She's beautiful, he whispered. I'm going to name her Betsy. Betsy is loud, Sully, I pointed out as we unloaded it into the ditch. We fire this up, and Higgins is going to hear it from her sunroom. Sound travels. Then we muffle it, Sully said, patting the roll cage. How? Hay bales, and egg crates, and maybe a mattress. We spent the next 3 hours engaging in what I can only describe as redneck acoustical engineering. We built a shed over the tunnel entrance using plywood, tarps, and about 40 bales of hay I borrowed from Frank's barn. To the casual observer, it looked like a very depressed nativity scene. Inside, we lined the walls with old carpet scraps and egg cartons. Moment of truth, Sully said. He turned the key. The diesel engine roared to life. Clack, 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 roar. Inside the shed, it was deafening. Outside, standing on the county road, it sounded like a very angry lawnmower 3 streets over. Acceptable! I yelled over the noise. What? Sully yelled back. I said it's acceptable. Dig! The progress was immediate. Betsy ate through the clay like it was chocolate mousse. Sully was a surgeon with the controls. He carved out the tunnel, dumping the spoil into a custom cart we'd rigged up, a wheelbarrow with a rope, which I then hauled out to the ditch. We were 10 feet in, then 20. We were passing under the county road easement and approaching the invisible line of the HOA dominion. Then the inevitable happened. I was outside trying to discreetly spread fresh dirt along the ditch bank to hide the volume when I saw the golf cart. It wasn't just a golf cart. It was a tactical golf cart. It had a lift kit, aggressive tread tires, and a roof rack, and driving it was Mrs. Higgins. She pulled up to the edge of the ditch, the electric motor whining to a halt. She stepped out, holding her phone. On the screen was a decibel meter app. Jack, she shouted. I signaled Sully to kill the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. Afternoon, Brenda, I said, leaning on my shovel. Nice wheels. Going off-roading? I am investigating a noise complaint, she said, thrusting the phone toward me. I registered 65 decibels from my patio. The community limit for continuous noise is 60. Must be the wind, I said. Or cicadas. It's a big year for bugs. Cicadas do not sound like a diesel engine, Jack. What is in that shed? She pointed a manicured finger at our hay bale fortress. It's a generator, I lied smoothly. We're testing it. Testing a generator? In a ditch? It's for charity, I improvised. Orphans. We're refurbishing vintage generators for orphans in warmer climates. They need power for their fans. She stared at me. Her eyes scanned the hay bales, the tarp, and the mud on my face. She knew I was lying. She just couldn't prove how. The bylaws strictly prohibit the operation of industrial machinery within 500 feet of a residence, she said. Technically, Brenda, I'm on county land. This ditch is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Public Works. Your bylaws stop at the grass line. I pointed to the perfectly edged line of St. Augustine grass 3 feet away. She took a step forward, her toe hovering over the grass line. If that noise continues, I will petition the board for an injunction against nuisance activities adjacent to the community. You do that, I said. And while you're at it, you might want to check Section 12 regarding harassment of county-sanctioned erosion specialists. I think the fine is pretty steep. She glared at me, turned on her heel, and marched back to her golf cart. As she drove away, she made a point of driving slowly, watching me in the rearview mirror. I went back into the shed. She gone? Sully asked. She's gone. But we're on a clock. Full throttle, Sully. We need to be under the gazebo by Tuesday. By day 4, the tunnel, which we had christened the Freedom Tube, had taken on a life of its own. It was 4 feet wide and 6 feet high, shored up with 4x4 posts and plywood headers every 3 feet. It smelled of damp earth, diesel exhaust, and the spicy Italian sub Sully insisted on eating for lunch. We had run an extension cord from the generator, stringing up Christmas lights along the ceiling. It gave the whole place a festive, subterranean speakeasy vibe. We had a cooler full of Gatorade and Dr. Pepper. We even had a designated thinking chair, an overturned bucket, for when we hit an obstruction. We were roughly 50 yards in. By my calculations, we were directly beneath the common area, a manicured park in the center of the neighborhood that featured a white gazebo, a koi pond, and a statue of a cherub peeing into a fountain. Hold up, Sully said, stopping the excavator. What is it? Ground's changing. We're hitting sand pockets. It's unstable. He pointed to the ceiling. A trickle of sand was hissing down between the shoring boards. Can we shore it up? Yeah, but the vibration is the problem. This sand transmits vibration like a drum. If I hammer too hard down here, things are going to shake up there. How much shake? Sully shrugged. Maybe a little rattle. Maybe we tip over a bird bath. Keep going. Just go gentle. Sully did not go gentle. He was a man of vigor. That evening, I decided to attend the monthly HOA town hall meeting. I needed to gauge the enemy's awareness. I washed the mud off, put on a collared shirt, and walked through the front gate, using the pedestrian code, which Higgins hadn't revoked yet. The meeting was held in the community center, a building that smelled of floor wax and judgment. There were about 30 residents there, sitting on metal folding chairs. Mrs. Higgins sat at the front, behind a table draped in a beige tablecloth. Next item on the agenda, Higgins announced, adjusting her reading glasses. The tremors. A murmur went through the room. A man in the second row, Mr. Abernathy, stood up. He was wearing a sweater vest, despite it being 80 degrees out. It knocked over my gnome, Abernathy shouted, his voice trembling. My rare Bavarian garden gnome fell right off its pedestal at 2:00 p.m. today, smashing into pieces. And my dog has been barking at the floor, a woman in the back added. Barking at the carpet, like there's a ghost. It's not ghosts, Higgins said, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. I suspect it is distinctively human activity. I raised my hand. Yes, Jack? She sighed. Has the board considered fracking? I asked innocently. The room went silent. Fracking? Abernathy asked. Hydraulic fracturing, I said, standing up and adopting my most serious voice. I read an article. The county next over just approved some test sites. Shockwaves travel miles through the bedrock. It causes micro-earthquakes. That's ridiculous, Higgins snapped. There is no fracking in this county. That's what they want you to think, I said. Big oil is sneaky, Brenda. They drill horizontal. They could be miles away, drinking your milkshake right now. I saw the panic set in. These were people who believed 5G towers caused gluten intolerance. The idea of secret oil drilling was like catnip to them. "My water did taste funny yesterday," someone whispered. "And I heard a humming noise," another shouted. That was definitely Betsy. "Mrs. Higgins," Abernathy yelled, "what are you doing to protect us from the frackers?" I'm doing nothing because it's not happening," Higgins stammered, losing control of the room. "Typical," I shouted. "The board ignores the real threats while persecuting innocent truck owners. We demand a geological survey." "Yes, a survey," the crowd chanted. Higgins looked ready to explode. She banged her gavel. "Order, order! I will look into the county permits. Next item." I sat back down, hiding a smile. I had bought us time, but a geological survey was the last thing I wanted. If they scanned the ground, they'd find a hollow tube filled with Christmas lights and 2 idiots. We had to finish fast. The next day, we were moving at breakneck speed. Sully was pushing Betsy to her limits. We were closing in on the final stretch, the last 50 yards to the barn. We were tired. We were complacent. And that is when the universe likes to remind you that physics is undefeated. We were digging under the space between the gazebo and the community pool. "Tree root," Sully called out. "Big one." I shone the flashlight. A thick, gnarled root was blocking the path. "Cut it?" I asked. "If I cut it, the tree might die. If the tree dies, Higgins investigates. We gotta go under it." "Deep dive. Do it." Sully angled the bucket down. He scooped. He scooped again. Crunch! It wasn't the sound of dirt. It was the sound of plastic shattering. "Oh," Sully said. "What was that?" "I think I hit a rock, or a pipe." We both froze. We listened. Hiss. Then gurgle. Then a sudden high-pressure spray of water erupted from the floor of the tunnel like a geyser. "Water!" Sully screamed, shielding his face. It hit me in the chest. It was cold, and it smelled strongly of chlorine. "It's the pool!" I yelled. "You hit the filtration line. Plug it, plug it. With what, my finger?" The tunnel floor was turning into soup instantly. The water was rising. If we didn't stop this, the tunnel would flood, the ground above would collapse, and the Whispering Pines community pool would drain into my dad's property. "The insulation!" Sully shouted, pointing to a stack of foam boards we were using for soundproofing. I grabbed a board and slammed it over the breach. The pressure was immense. It sprayed out the sides, soaking me. "Get the quickset!" I roared. Sully scrambled back to the supply cart and grabbed a bag of rapid-setting concrete mix. He tore it open with his teeth and poured the dry powder directly onto the leak. "More!" He poured another bag. Then he jumped on top of the foam board, using his weight to hold it down. The water mixed with the concrete, creating a fast-hardening sludge. We sat there for 10 minutes, Sully sitting on a pile of wet concrete, me holding the sides with the duct tape, breathing heavy. The hissing stopped. "Did we fix it?" Sully whispered. "I think so." "Is the pool going to be empty?" "It's a return line. We probably only lost a few hundred gallons. The autofill system will handle it." "Good. Good." "However," I said, looking up, "we have created a void." "A void?" "We washed out a lot of dirt before we plugged it. Gravity is going to want that space back." "You think?" Above us there was a muffled thump. "We need to check topside," I said. "Now!" It was 2:00 a.m. We crawled out of the tunnel, covered in blue concrete slime. We grabbed shovels and a bag of topsoil and ran across the field, keeping low to avoid the streetlights. We reached the spot near the pool equipment shed. There, in the middle of the pristine emerald green lawn, was a sinkhole. It wasn't huge, maybe 2 feet wide, but it was deep. It looked like the earth had just opened its mouth to yawn. "Oh God," I said. "Higgins walks her corgi here at 6:00 a.m. If Mr. Puffles falls in a hole, we're dead." "Fill it," Sully hissed. We started shoveling dirt into the hole. It took 5 bags. We packed it down. But now we had a bare patch of dirt in a sea of perfect grass. "We need sod," I said. "Where are we going to get sod at 2 a.m.? I looked around. I saw Mrs. Higgins' front yard across the street. Her prize-winning landscaping. "Don't," Sully said. "That's a felony." "It's justice," I corrected. I ran across the street. I found a spot behind her azalea bushes, shielded from the streetlights. I carefully cut a 2x2 square of sod. I carried it back like it was the crown jewels. We placed it over the patch. I stomped it down. It was a perfect match. "Hey!" We both spun around. Standing on the pool deck, wrapped in a towel, was a teenager. It was Kyle, the kid who lived in 4B. He was holding a vape pen and looking terrified. Are you guys burying a body?" Kyle squeaked. I looked at Sully. Sully looked at Kyle. Sully raised his shovel menacingly. "No," I said quickly, pushing Sully's arm down. "Kyle, listen to me. You didn't see us." "You're the guy with the loud truck," Kyle said. "My mom hates you." "Your mom is a wonderful woman," I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a soggy $20 bill. "Kyle, have you ever seen a sinkhole?" "No." "Exactly. And you didn't see one tonight. You saw raccoons. Big ones. Fixing the lawn." Kyle looked at the money. He looked at the shovel. He looked at the vape pen he, wasn't supposed to have. "Cool," Kyle said, snatching the 20. "Raccoons? Got it." He vanished into the night. We trudged back to the tunnel entrance. "Close one," Sully said. "Too close," I agreed. "We're out of cash, Sully. I spent the last of the budget on that concrete." "We still got 40 yards to go," Sully said. "And I don't work for free. I got alimony." "I know," I said, looking toward the dark outline of the barn. "I have to talk to the financier." "The dad?" The dad. The walk to the barn the next morning felt different. Usually, I walked with the anger of the oppressed. Today, I walked with the anxiety of a man about to ask his father for $5,000 to fund a hole in the ground. Frank was exactly where I expected him to be, sitting on a bucket, staring at the disassembled transmission of the John Deere like it was a complex Sudoku puzzle. "You look like you're about to ask me for a kidney," Frank said without looking up. "Worse," I said. "I need cash." Frank put down his wrench. He wiped his hands on his coveralls, leaving a fresh streak of 10W30 on his thigh. "For what? Did you get arrested? Is this bail money? I told you not to punch the HOA lady." "I didn't punch her. I undermined her. Literally." I pulled up a milk crate and sat down. "Dad, the tunnel is 60 yards in. We are past the road. We are past the drainage easement. We are currently directly beneath the gazebo where Mrs. Higgins holds her Tuesday morning mindfulness and mimosas sessions." Frank's eyes sparkled. "Is that right?" "It is, but we hit a snag. We had a hydrological incident involving the pool plumbing. We fixed it, but it cost us the rest of the operating budget. I need materials. I need lumber for shoring, and Sully won't work for free. He says his ex-wife has a radar for missed alimony payments." Frank leaned back, crossing his arms. "So you want me to pay for a tunnel that, legally speaking, doesn't exist, dug by a man who looks like a pirate, so you can bring me my own tools?" "It's not just about the tools, Dad." I leaned in. I knew I had to sell this. I had to appeal to Frank's deepest desire, to be a nuisance to the establishment. "Think about the future," I whispered. "Once this tunnel is done, we have a secure subterranean supply line. The HOA has banned commercial deliveries, right? No heavy trucks?" "Right." "Well, with the tunnel, we can bring in anything. Fertilizer, diesel, unpasteurized milk. We could smuggle in a whole cow if we greased it up enough. We become a sovereign nation, Dad, an island of freedom in a sea of beige tyranny." Frank stared at me. He chewed on his lip. Then slowly, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a leather wallet that was held together by duct tape and hope. "I've got a stash," he said. "Was saving it for a rainy day. Or a new tractor seat. But this sounds better." He handed me a wad of cash that smelled like peppermint and old receipts. "Get it done. And Jack? Yeah? Make it wide enough for a keg. I want to host a party when you break through." With the infusion of angel investor capital, the operation went from desperate scramble to industrial revolution. Sully and I went shopping. We didn't just buy lumber, we bought technology. Specifically, we bought a used conveyor belt system from a bakery that was going out of business. "It's for dough," the bakery owner had told us. "But it should handle dirt." It did handle dirt. It handled it beautifully. We set it up in segments. Now, instead of me running back and forth with a wheelbarrow like a medieval serf, Sully would dig, dump the dirt on the belt, and it would hum along the tunnel ceiling, depositing the spoil directly into the camouflage tent in the ditch. "This is living," Sully said, watching the dirt fly by. He had installed a cup holder on the excavator. We made 20 feet that day, then 30. We were flying. But hubris always invites nemesis. On Thursday, I was topside, spreading the spoil, which we were now disguising as berm reinforcement along the ditch, when I saw a truck pull up. It wasn't Higgins. It was a white Ford F-150 with precision surveying on the side. A man got out. He set up a tripod. He aimed a laser theodolite directly at our ditch. I keyed my walkie-talkie. "Sully, red alert. Shut it down." The conveyor belt whirred to a halt. I walked over to the surveyor. "Afternoon, you lost?" "Checking property lines," the man said. He was bored. He didn't look like a hired gun, but he was definitely working for the enemy. "HOA president ordered a verification of the easement boundaries. She thinks the ditch is encroaching on the common area." He looked at the ditch. He looked at the suspiciously large pile of fresh dirt. "That's a lot of sediment." "Storm runoff," I said quickly. "Big storm last week." "Didn't rain last week." "Localized," I said. "Microclimate. Very intense." He squinted at me. "I need to shoot the grade at the bottom of the ditch." If he went into the ditch, he would see the tent. He would see the conveyor belt. He would see the tunnel. "You can't," I said. "Why not?" "Flash flood warning." "It's sunny. There isn't a cloud in the sky." "Upstream," I said, pointing vaguely toward the mountains, which were 200 miles away. "Dam release. Very dangerous. County Ordinance 44B. No personnel in the drainage channel during release hours." He looked at his watch. "I've never heard of that." "It's new. Look, I can't stop you, but if you get washed away, the paperwork is going to be a nightmare for me, and I hate paperwork." While I was talking, I had my hand behind my back, frantically texting Frank. "Turn on the irrigation. All of it. Aim at road." The surveyor took a step toward the ditch. "I'll take my chances." At that exact moment, a high-pressure stream of water arched over the hedge of my dad's farm. Frank had fired up the agricultural sprinklers, the big ones used for corn. But he hadn't aimed them at the corn. He had aimed them at the road. A deluge of water hammered the asphalt, cascading down the slope and rapidly filling the ditch with muddy, churning water. "There it is," I shouted, jumping back. "The release! Run for your life!" The surveyor grabbed his tripod and scrambled up the bank as the water rushed past, swirling around our camouflaged tent but thankfully obscuring the entrance. "Crazy," the surveyor muttered, wiping water off his shirt. "You were right." "I take erosion very seriously," I said solemnly. He packed up his truck. "I'll come back next week, when it's dry." "Next week is fine," I said. "Next week, we'll be gone." We were in the final stretch. According to my calculations, which involved a tape measure and counting my own steps above ground, we were 10 feet away from the barn's foundation. The tunnel was a masterpiece. It was 75 yards of shored-up, illuminated, ventilated defiance. Sully had even hung a calendar, featuring vintage tractors, on one of the support beams. "We're gonna hit concrete soon," Sully said, patting Betsy's dashboard. "Then we need the breaker." "I have a jackhammer lined up," I said, "but we have a problem." "Another one?" "Topside. There's a guy in a hard hat walking around with Higgins. And he's not a surveyor. He's county." I had seen them from the barn loft. Mrs. Higgins was pointing aggressively at the ground, then at the barn, then at the ditch. She had called in the big guns, code enforcement. "If he comes down here," Sully said, "we're cooked. Unpermitted excavation, non-code electrical, no emergency exit. They'll bury us in here." "He's not coming down here," I said. "I have a plan." 10 minutes later, I met them at the property line. "Mr. Miller," the inspector said. He was a man named Gary. He had the weary look of a bureaucrat who just wanted to reach retirement without having to fill out an accident report. "We've received a report of an unpermitted subterranean structure." "It's not a structure, Gary," I said warmly. "It's a civil defense shelter." Gary blinked. "A what?" "Civil defense. Cold War era. My dad found old blueprints. We're restoring it. You know, with the global geopolitical climate being what it is, one can never be too careful." Mrs. Higgins scoffed. "He's lying. He's digging a tunnel to his father's barn because he's too stubborn to walk." "Brenda, please," I said, looking hurt. "This is about national security." Gary looked at his clipboard. "Civil defense shelters. That's actually a gray area. Technically, they fall under federal jurisdiction if they're designated fallout zones. Do you have a designation?" "Pending," I said. "But Gary, I'd love to show you, really. I'm proud of the shoring." I gestured toward the ditch. "Right this way." I took a step, then stopped. I turned back to Gary, my face filled with sudden concern. "Oh, actually, do you have your respirator?" Gary paused. "My what?" "Respirator, filter, cartridges. The radon levels down there are spicy." "Spicy?" "Off the charts," I whispered. Geiger counter was clicking like a tap dancer on speed. Plus we disturbed a pocket of, I want to say swamp gas, but it smells more like sulfur and ancient decay. I've been holding my breath a lot. I coughed dramatically. It was a wet, rattling cough. Gary took a step back. Bureaucrats fear two things: lawsuits and lung disease. I don't have my hazmat gear with me," Gary said. "Oh, that's a shame," I said. "I really wanted you to inspect the header beams. I think they're up to code, but with the methane buildup, who knows?" Mrs. Higgins was turning purple. "He is making this up. Go in there. Do your job." Gary looked at the dark, muddy hole. He looked at me, coughing into my sleeve. He looked at Mrs. Higgins, who looked like she would bite him if he got too close. "I can perform a visual inspection from the surface," Gary decided. "If I see no evidence of structural compromise to the roadway, I will close the ticket." He walked to the road. He looked at the asphalt. It was flat. It was perfect. "Road looks good," Gary said, checking a box. "Ticket closed. Mrs. Higgins, unless you have evidence of radon poisoning, I suggest you let these men finish their shelter." He got in his truck and drove away. Mrs. Higgins stood there, vibrating with rage. "This isn't over, Jack," she hissed. "I know you're up to something. I'll be watching. I'll be listening. If I hear one power tool, one hammer, I'm calling the sheriff." "Brenda," I said, "you need a hobby. Have you tried knitting?" She stormed off. I went back down the hole. "We good?" Sully asked. "We're good. But we have a problem. She's on high alert for noise. And we're about to start jackhammering through a 12-inch concrete foundation." Sully looked at the wall of dirt in front of us. We can't chip it by hand. No, we need cover fire. I pulled out my phone and checked the weather app. Perfect, I said. What? Thunderstorm rolling in tonight. Severe. Heavy thunder. And it's July 3rd. So? So the HOA does their annual fireworks safety test tonight. Between the thunder and the explosions, we'll have a window. The storm hit at 9 o'clock. It was a proper summer gully washer. Thunder rattled the fillings in my teeth. Simultaneously, down at the community center, the HOA board was setting off test fireworks to ensure they were auditorily appropriate for the holiday. Boom! Crack! Rumble! Now! I yelled. Sully fired up the jackhammer. We were at the end of the line. The dirt was gone. In front of us was the gray, rough face of the barn's foundation. The noise in the tunnel was apocalyptic. The jackhammer screamed. The compressor roared. But outside? Outside, the world was exploding with thunder and pyrotechnics. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. Dust filled the air. My teeth chattered in my skull. Sully looked like a demon, covered in gray dust, shaking violently as he drove. The steel bit into the concrete. A crack appeared. Then a chunk fell out. We could see darkness on the other side. "Breakthrough!" Sully screamed. He leaned into it. The hammer punched through. A hole the size of a basketball opened up. Then a hole the size of a tire. We stopped the hammer. The silence that rushed in was ringing. We coughed, waving the dust away. We crawled through the jagged opening, pushing aside loose concrete. I stood up. I was standing on oil-stained concrete. I smelled diesel. I smelled old hay. I saw the familiar rusted grill of the John Deere tractor looming above me. We were in. "We did it!" Sully wheezed, wiping his goggles. "We actually did it!" "Welcome to the Promised Land," I said. "Took you long enough," a voice rumbled. Frank was sitting in his folding chair by the workbench. He had 3 cold beers waiting. He cracked one open and handed it to me. "Nice timing," Frank said. "I was getting thirsty." "Happy Independence Day, Dad," I said, taking a long drink. It tasted like victory. Suddenly, the barn door creaked open. The storm was raging outside, rain lashing against the metal roof. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted by a flash of lightning. It was Mrs. Higgins. She was wearing a yellow raincoat and holding a flashlight. She looked like the fisherman from a horror movie, if the fisherman wanted to speak to the manager. She stepped inside, dripping water onto the floor. "I heard it," she said, her voice trembling with triumph. "I heard the drilling. I knew it. You're... She stopped. She shone the flashlight at us. Then she shone it at the floor. She saw the hole. The jagged, gaping hole in the concrete, with the tunnel stretching away into the darkness beneath her precious road. Her mouth opened. You undermined the common ground." "Private property," Frank barked. "Get out of my barn, Brenda." "You dug a tunnel," she shrieked. "This is a violation of everything. Section 1, Clause 1, Section 4, the aesthetic, the—" She marched forward, pointing her finger at me. "I am going to have you arrested. I am going to have this barn condemned. I am going to—" "Brenda," I interrupted, stepping forward. "What?" she snapped. "Look down." She looked down. She was standing on the edge of the hole. "You are currently standing in a barn," I said calmly, "which is on private land. You, however, did not use the tunnel. You walked through the door. So? So you're trespassing. And in this county? On a farm? At night?" Frank picked up a large, heavy wrench and tapped it thoughtfully against his palm. Clink, clink. "I suggest you leave," Frank said quietly. "Before I call the sheriff and tell him there's a prowler in my barn." Mrs. Higgins looked at Frank. She looked at the wrench. She looked at the hole. She realized, for the first time, that her bylaws had no power here. The beige curtain had fallen. She turned around, stiff as a board, and walked back out into the rain. Sully watched her go. "She's gonna sue us, isn't she?" Oh, absolutely, I said, clinking my beer against his. But by the time the lawyers figure this out, I'll have the transmission fixed. And the milk, Frank added. Don't forget the milk. And the milk, I agreed. To the underground resistance. To the resistance, Sully said. We drank. Outside, the thunder rolled, but for the first time in months, the road to my father's house was wide open. The lawsuit arrived 3 days later via a process server who looked like he apologized for a living. It was thick. It was heavy. It was titled Whispering Pines Homeowners Association versus Jackson Miller, Frank Miller, and John Doe, alias Sully. They're suing us for subterranean trespass, I said, flipping through the document at Frank's kitchen table, and willful destruction of community sediment, and psychological distress caused by vibration. Frank poured coffee. Can we countersue for harassment by beige person? I don't think that's a tort, Dad. We need a lawyer. I got a guy, Sully said. He was currently eating a bowl of cereal in our kitchen, despite not living there. My cousin Vinny. Is his name actually Vinny? I asked. Vincent. He specializes in unconventional property disputes. Does he have a degree? He has a suit, and he got me out of that thing with the emu farm. 2 weeks later, we were sitting in a conference room at the county courthouse. On one side was Mrs. Higgins and a team of 3 lawyers who looked like they were cloned in a lab that specialized in billing hours. On our side was me, Frank, Sully, wearing a tie over a flannel shirt, and Vincent. Vincent looked like a used car salesman who had found Jesus, then lost him again at a poker game. Gentlemen, the mediator began, Mrs. Higgins claims you dug a tunnel under HOA property. Allegedly, Vincent said, leaning back in his chair, my clients were engaged in a civil defense restoration project. There is no record of a shelter there, Higgins' lead lawyer barked. That's because it was top secret, Vincent countered. Cold War. Very hush-hush. You wouldn't want the Soviets knowing where the tractor parts were hidden, would you? The lawyer stared at him. Mr. Gambini. Just Vincent. Vincent. They tunneled under a gazebo. Mrs. Higgins' prize begonias have sunk 3 inches due to soil settling. Soil settling? I piped up. Or perhaps fracking? Higgins slammed her hand on the table. There is no fracking. You dug a hole. You admitted it. I saw you in the barn. You were trespassing in the barn, Vincent said, pointing a finger at her. Fruit of the poisonous tree, Brenda. Anything you saw while illegally entering my client's agricultural domicile is inadmissible. It's like basic law stuff. The mediator rubbed his temples. Look, the tunnel exists. The HOA wants it filled in. The cost to fill it in is estimated at $50,000. We don't have 50 grand, Frank said. I spent the last of my money on the conveyor belt. Then we will seize the property, Higgins gleefully announced. We will put a lien on the barn. Whoa, hold on, I said. I pulled out a map. Vincent, show them Exhibit B. Vincent slapped a document on the table. It was a geological survey from 1984. According to the original plat maps, I said, the HOA owned surface rights and subsurface rights to a depth of 6 feet for utility purposes. Our tunnel header is at 8 feet. The lawyers leaned in. They whispered. 8 feet? The lead lawyer asked. 8 feet, 4 inches, I confirmed. We measured, twice. Technically, we are in the mineral rights zone, and in this state, mineral rights supersede surface rights. What minerals are you extracting? The lawyer sneered. Dirt? Rare earth clays, I lied. For pottery. My dad is an artist. Frank looked at me. I am? Yes, Dad, you're very avant-garde. Higgins looked ready to have a stroke. I don't care about the depth. It's a tunnel. It's weird. It violates the spirit of the community. The spirit of the community, Vincent said poetically, is freedom, and also not paying 50 grand to fill a hole that isn't hurting anyone. The mediator looked at the lawyers. If the depth claim holds up, you're looking at a year of litigation to prove damages. Do you really want to spend HOA dues on a geological lawsuit? Higgins's lawyer whispered in her ear. She turned pale. She whispered back aggressively. The lawyer shook his head. Fine, Higgins spat. We will settle. We're listening, I said. The tunnel stays, the lawyer said, but it must be inspected by a structural engineer at your expense. It can never be used for commercial traffic. And you, she pointed at me. You must paint your truck beige. No deal, I said immediately. The beast stays black. Then we go to trial. Wait, Frank said. How about a compromise? We inspect the tunnel. We don't use it for commercial traffic. Only agricultural support. And Jack doesn't park the truck on the road. He parks it in the barn, which he can now access via the tunnel. Higgins narrowed her eyes. So the truck disappears from the street? Gone, I said. Like a ninja. And the tunnel entrance in the ditch? We'll plant a bush over it, Sully offered. A nice one. Hydrangeas. Higgins considered this. The truck was her primary nemesis. The tunnel was just a symptom. If the truck was gone, she had won the aesthetic war. Fine, she hissed. But if I see one speck of dirt on the road, I sue. 6 months later. The tunnel, now officially named the Miller-Sully Memorial Transit Corridor, is fully operational. We reinforced the walls with proper steel shoring. Vincent knew a guy. We installed permanent LED lighting. Sully even put in a mini-fridge halfway down for hydration stops. It is a marvel of engineering. I park the beast on the county road shoulder, legally. I walk down into the ditch, push aside a very lush plastic hydrangea bush, and unlock the steel door we installed. I walk 75 yards underground, beneath the manicured lawns, beneath the sleeping gazebo, beneath the unsuspecting feet of the Whispering Pines residents. I pop up in the barn, right next to the tractor. Life is good. Hey, Sully says. He's in the barn, working on a new project. He's building a subterranean potato cannon. You get the supplies? I did. I open my backpack. I pull out 2 gallons of unpasteurized milk, a bag of fertilizer that isn't HOA approved, and a neon sign that says open. Frank wants the sign for the man cave, I explain. Sweet. Frank walks in. The tractor is running. We fixed the transmission 3 months ago, but he likes to just let it idle to remind Higgins it still exists. Mail's here, Frank says, tossing a letter on the workbench. It's from the HOA. I open it. Dear resident, due to a sudden and unexplained settling of the soil beneath the community gazebo, the board has voted to install a new, heavier concrete foundation. This will require a special assessment fee of $500 per home. I look at Sully. Sully looks at the ceiling. We might have shaved the margins a little close on the gazebo headers, Sully admits. Just a little, I say. Also, Frank says, grinning, she sent a personal note. I look at the bottom of the letter. In angry red ink, Mendemas Higgins has scrawled, I know you are down there. I can hear you laughing. I grab a shovel. I grab a beer. She's not wrong, I say. I walk to the hole in the floor. Come on, boys. I think the tunnel needs a skylight. Let's see if we can pop up right in the middle of her rose garden. That's a joke, right? Sully asks, following me down. For legal purposes? I pause at the ladder. Yes, it's a joke. But as I descend into the cool, dark earth, listening to the hum of the conveyor belt and the distant rumble of suburban life above, I know one thing for sure. The resistance lives, and it's only 8 feet deep.